For weeks, the Biden administration has been throwing everything but the kitchen sink at Israel to force them to not go into Rafah in southern Gaza to finish Hamas. Many have been wondering why on earth this is so important to America. It's almost like there's something that they're trying to hide in Rafah or something they desperately don't want to be discovered there. Well, the secret's finally out of the bag. Israel is in Rafah currently, and what they have just discovered is frankly very shocking. This is going to be a crazy one, guys, so hold on. I'm Ben, and this is the Israel Guys. Welcome back to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of Jew hatred and anti-Israel propaganda, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Thank you so much once again for joining us here on YouTube. Guys, as I said in the intro, people have been speculating for a while now why the U.S. has been so desperate for Israel to not invade Rafah. The United States, Egypt, European Union, and Qatar have been throwing everything they can at Israel to keep them from invading, to the point of the Biden administration has withheld weapon shipments to Israel quasi-illegally over this issue specifically. The International Criminal Court and the court system of the UN have both been throwing everything they can at Israel also over this issue, with the sanction of the Biden administration, with the cooperation of the Biden administration. Biden just squashed an attempt to sanction the ICC by Congress, by Republican members of Congress, also some bipartisan support as well, to keep them from enacting these arrest warrants on Bibi Netanyahu and Israel's defense minister. And that begs the question, why? Why is the Biden administration and these other countries so adamant that Israel not invade Rafah? Officially, on paper, they're saying it's because they don't want the extra civilian casualty load that would happen if Israel invaded Rafah. And this is foolishness. This makes no sense on paper. This is not even a plausible excuse for several reasons. One, Israel had a good plan to move civilian casualties out of Rafah, and they executed that plan brilliantly. Within the first week or so, Israel moved 1 million civilians out of Rafah, and so they could operate very quickly, effectively, easily. They had presented that plan to the United States. The United States really didn't care. Also, Israel has a phenomenal track record here that they can operate in very dense urban environments with a very low civilian casualty count. Despite the world throwing everything that can at Israel, genocidal accusation wise, the alleged death toll in Israel, in Gaza right now, is 34,000 since the beginning of the war. That's the alleged death toll, according to Hamas, which has every incentive to inflate this. According to the UN, they only have records quasi-provided by Hamas, for about 24,000 people dead. When you take into account normal death, so this is all death toll in Gaza, right? So if you take into account the normal death records, and also the fact that this is probably inflated by Hamas, we're looking at probably close to 20,000, 15,000 or so Gazans killed, about 20,000 probably Gazans killed total since the beginning of the war. In the war, Israel has killed 15,000 Hamas terrorists so far. So if these numbers are correct, which we don't really know the scope of these numbers at all, but if they are correct and our assumptions are correct, that means Israel's killed about 3 terrorists for every 1 civilian, which is unheard of in war, especially urban environment war. This is unheard of. And this is largely thanks to Israel's extensive urban combat training that their soldiers have had to go through, and their experience in big cities inside of Judea and Samaria, like Jenin and Shechem, Nablus, but also to Israel's very advanced technology they've been working on with the drones and all kinds of stuff to advance urban combat to avoid civilian casualties. So Israel has a phenomenal track record here, 3-1 terrorist to civilian estimated death count, which is unheard of in urban combat war. That just does not happen. So with that, why on earth was the U.S. so adamant that Israel not go into Rafah? There had to be something more to this. Well, Israel's in Rafah now. They've taken control of the Philadelphia corridor completely, which is the Gazan border between Gaza and Egypt. They now have full control there, right? The IDF has now discovered dozens of tunnels under the border between Gaza and Egypt. Tunnels actively used up until recently, tunnels, many of which are large enough to be able to drive large vehicles through. Evidence of vehicles being driven through recently, like up until very recently. In between, I repeat, Gaza and Egypt. This is insane. Insane. There's no way, I say there's no way, there's probably almost no way that the Egyptian government did not know these tunnels existed and did not know exactly what they were being used for. This is slightly confusing because a lot of people think that Israel has a peace agreement with Egypt, which technically they do. They have a cold peace agreement with Egypt. So why would Egypt be facilitating equipment and transfer? Because if there's these open tunnels between Rafah and between Gaza and Egypt, we know that Hamas personnel are moving in and out. We know that weaponry is moving in and out. We know that hostages are moving out, probably into Egypt. And that there's no way the Egyptian government, almost no way that they did not know about these tunnels. So that means Egypt is full-scale facilitating Hamas in Gaza and Hamas's survival, which, like I said, is crazy because Egypt has a cold peace agreement with Israel. Caroline Glitchers broke down some facts on JNS on this issue in a phenomenal article that I'll put down in the description below in the show notes. She said in 2017, Egypt, along with the Saudis and the UAE and Bahrain, cut ties with Qatar over its support for Iran. So that kind of created this sort of alliance between these Arab countries that did not want to be associated with Iran. This gave Israel some level of confidence that Egypt was on the right side of history, so to speak, and that they could build some sort of lasting alliance with Egypt. But in 2021, what a lot of people don't realize is that Egypt was the first of those states to renew ties with Qatar, right? And Qatar has very strong ties with Iran and facilitates Hamas inside of Qatar. For the last 20 years or so, Egypt has been building up their military infrastructure in the Sinai, making Israelis very concerned as to what their future plans are if Egypt plans to renew aggression in the Sinai against Israel at some point in the near future. Now the tunnels were discovered. Now we know that Egypt has been facilitating Hamas full scale. I mean, these are huge, huge, huge tunnels, and there's rumors that there's upwards of maybe 50 of them underneath the border in between Gaza and Egypt, which would explain why Hamas has so many rockets. Israel has blockaded the ports. They search the ships coming into Gaza to keep weaponry from coming into Gaza, and yet Hamas has tens of thousands of rockets and other big military equipment, large-scale military equipment. They're coming under the border. More than likely, they're coming under the border from Egypt, directly facilitated, enabled by the nation of Egypt. We'll get into what this means and how America plays into it in just a second. But first, I have a question for you. Where do you buy your olive oil and honey from? How about your tea, chocolate, and cosmetics? If you knew that you could get these items from Israel and that your purchase would help families living in Israel's heartland to thrive, would you be interested? What if I told you that you could purchase all of these items and much more easily online, and everything will be shipped to your doorstep in a matter of days? Enter Blessed by Israel. The truth is that Blessed by Israel was founded by very good friends of ours after coming to Israel on a trip with our organization. When they met the brave pioneers who live in Judea and Samaria, they were inspired to help those families thrive by bringing their products to the United States. Every purchase you make is a direct investment in the family-owned businesses who are located in Israel's biblical heartland. As you consider where to make your investments this year, I urge you to consider buying as many products as possible from Israel. Visit Blessed, B-U-Y, Israel to check out their amazing product line, or click the link down in the description below. So back to this breakdown. Egypt's dictator, El-Sisi, his son, is the deputy commander of Egypt's General Intelligence Directorate. That organization controls the Egypt-Gaza border. They have been brokering the bribes for Gazans that enter Egypt. As we've talked about before, Egypt has only been letting a few Gazans escape into Egypt. They haven't been letting any asylum seekers claim asylum inside of Egypt. But They've been letting a few Gazans in if they pay tens of thousands of dollars to enter. Egypt has been raking in millions and millions of dollars over this scam to allow Gazans to flee for their lives into Egypt. And no one in the world has said a thing about that. Surprise, surprise. Beginning in February, al-Sisi began threatening to cancel the peace treaty, Egypt's peace treaty with Israel, if Israel invaded Rafah. This is one of the major reasons, reportedly, as I'm hearing, that Israel took 3 months to invade Rafah. Also, the American pressure was a big reason why they didn't invade. But the American pressure combined with the Egyptian pressure on Israel was enough for Netanyahu to really have to stop and think and work through this before they invaded. This prolonged the war for Gazan civilians, prolonged the war for Israelis, and more people died because of it. Egypt not only was threatening Israel with the revoking of their peace treaty, but they also joined South Africa in the international and the court of justice and the UN. They have also taken a moderating role in between Hamas and Israel officially. They've been enjoying that role. And in the process, according to a CNN article, I believe, they undermined a possible deal to free hostages recently by deliberately miscommunicating Israel's offer to Hamas. And as a result, hostages presumably are in captivity because of that. In exchange for this moderating role that Egypt is taking between Hamas and Israel, Egypt has received loans and investments from the International Monetary Fund, the EU, and the UAE, totaling more than $50 billion. And that's presumably with the U.S.'s support. From what I'm hearing, from the sources that I'm looking at, the U.S. could keep these loans from going through, no problem at all. Like the reason these loans went through is because the U.S. signed off on them. Before the war started in October, Egypt was on the brink of bankruptcy. These loans saved them economically, brought them up to a normal place, a more normal place economically. Also, in case you don't realize, the United States and Egypt work hand in glove. According to the State Department, I believe, they've said that Egypt is, next to Israel, our most important ally in the Middle East. We give them about $3 billion every year in military aid. We do a lot of intelligence work together. They facilitate a lot of our projects in the Middle East. We have a lot of operatives inside of Egypt doing different projects for the U.S. government. So, if there are dozens and dozens of huge tunnels underneath Rafah in between Gaza and Egypt that are presumably funneling a huge supply of weapons into Gaza and allowing Hamas operatives to come in and out at will, it is inconceivable in my mind that the U.S. did not know this, did not know about this, that U.S. intelligence, the CIA, did not know this. And if they did know it, this would completely explain why the U.S. has been panicking about Israel going into Rafah, because they knew that their dirty laundry would be dragged out into full sunlight for all the world to see, that, in effect, the U.S. has been enabling both sides of this war, giving aid to Israel for their defense, but also keeping Egypt's back, guarding Egypt's back as they fund Hamas and facilitate Hamas and keep the war going for them as well. For some reason, the Biden administration does not want the destruction of Hamas. They want them to continue inside of Gaza. They're allowing that through Egypt, and they're pressuring through Egypt Israel to keep them from finishing Hamas off once and for all. But it's not working. Israel went in anyway. Israel now, as I said earlier, has full control of the Philadelphia corridor, the Gazan-Egypt border, and they're just on the tip of the iceberg as to what they've discovered there with these tunnels. Who knows? There are still thousands of tunnels to be discovered, investigated, hauled out, destroyed underneath of Rafah. Who knows what other secrets they will discover before this is over. Guys, this is insane. This is insane with the U.S. government, what our country is doing right now. We have to get our politicians aware of this. There's a big movement right now to get politicians in Washington aware of this so that they can hold the Biden administration accountable for their actions. The implications of these discoveries are just starting. They largely remain completely to be seen. Guys, don't forget to check out the amazing work of Blessed by Israel, blessed, B-U-Y, Israel.com. The link is also down in the description below. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening in the land of Israel. We'll be back nearly every day, Monday through Friday, with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.